While audiences typically don't want to go into movies knowing too much, there are often certain expectations and preconceptions. Whether it's thanks to rumours, promises made by actors or directors, or the impression given by trailers and marketing, certain checks can be written that movies are expected to cash. That doesn't always happen, however, as films can always let you down in this regard. So, with that in mind, I'm Ellie with What Culture, here with 10 times movie franchises totally broke your trust. Number 10. Superman's speedy exit in the DCEU. The world of DC movies has been on something of a tough run for some time now. Though there have been recent highlights in the form of Joker and the Batman, these have been diamonds in a lot of rough, stretching back to the very start of the DCEU and continuing on up to Black Adam, Shazam! Fury of the Gods, and The Flash. There was one recent tiny bright spot that did at least give fans some hope for the DCEU. Henry Cavill had been absent from any DC production since Zack Snyder's Justice League, and in what was the worst kept secret in Hollywood at the time, returned in the Black Adam post-credits scene. This was huge and sent the fandom into a craze as Superman was back and was about to go toe-to-toe with Black Adam. In reality, it didn't matter who stood opposite him. This wasn't about The Rock or the supposed power shift in the DCEU. This was about the Man of Steel, and he was back. Until he wasn't. Almost as soon as Henry Cavill officially announced his return to the role, James Gunn pulled the rug from under everyone and confirmed that Cavill wouldn't be the Superman moving forward in the DCU. Talk about getting people's hopes up. Number 9. No proper ending in Divergent. Harry Potter is viewed as one of the most popular movie franchises ever. But at the same time, it also introduced to Hollywood that cursed trope of splitting the adaptation of the final novel in a series into 2 parts. Harry Potter did it, The Hunger Games did it, and Divergent did it. Kind of. After Allegiant Part 1's dismal reception, earning just $172 million at the box office and holding a score of 11% on Rotten Tomatoes, the final movie of the Divergent franchise was subsequently cancelled. As an adaptation of a popular young adult novel series, the Divergent franchise had a loyal following even in spite of the disappointing box office numbers. To leave the movie series unfinished and on a cliffhanger no less, with no level of closure, feels unfair. There were reportedly talks for a TV movie in lieu of the originally planned franchise ending, but with none of the cast interested in returning, the Divergent story ended on the big screen only 3/4 told. When you get invested in a movie franchise, you should be able to trust that you will see the end. Imagine the Hunger Games finishing when Peter savagely attacked Katniss, or never getting to see the final battle of Hogwarts. To be perfectly honest, the Hunger Games and Divergent in my mind got completely muddled together. What team are you, the Hunger Games or Divergent? Let us know in the comments down below. Number 8. Actually, Michael isn't dead in Halloween. Fake-out deaths are nothing new in movies. They can be utilised to varying success to get an emotional reaction out of an audience before an immense moment when the character is revealed to be alive. Think Nick Fury in The Winter Soldier, or Commissioner Gordon in The Dark Knight. However, to do this within the space of a movie is one thing, but to have a character appear to be dead before a retcon in a sequel 4 years later is something else entirely. This is exactly what happened when Michael Myers was brought back in Halloween Resurrection. At the end of Halloween H2O 20 years later, Laurie Strode supposedly killed Michael by decapitation, and that was the end of it. Still, 4 years later, Resurrection revealed in the most insulting and infuriating way that the iconic villain had miraculously escaped death and that Laurie had instead killed an innocent man. The comic book movie genre in particular has overused this trope to the point that any character death is immediately greeted with skepticism from the audience, knowing that the character will likely eventually survive. This shouldn't be the case in a movie franchise like Halloween though. Death all of a sudden becomes redundant if you can't trust that it's real, and subsequent genuine death scenes will risk losing their gravity and impact. Number 7. No universal reset in the DCU. Henry Cavill being replaced as Superman isn't the only change coming for the DC. With James Gunn and Peter Safran at the helm, the entire shared universe is going through a complete transition from the DCEU to the DCU. In this unique set of circumstances, questions arose over how exactly this change would be handled, and who and what would be considered canon moving forward. In Gunn's initial video announcing the slate of the DCU's first chapter, he spoke about how The Flash would reset the entire DC universe, understandably leading to conclusions that the movie would be the DCU's jumping-off point. Messing around with the multiverse would offer the opportunity for the cleanest transition and explanation, but this didn't happen. The Flash ended leaving more questions than answers. How can Viola Davis still play Amanda Waller? Does George Clooney exist as Bruce Wayne in the DCU moving forward? Where will Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom sit? Essentially, The Flash did very little to reset the universe as was promised. Gunn's original video on YouTube currently has roughly 2 million hits, setting this expectation for a lot of people. He clarified on Twitter in a comment that in all likelihood was seen by a mere fraction of those same people, what he actually meant, stating that The Flash would reset some things, but not all things, in spite of explicitly using the phrase, reset the entire DC universe. Number 6. The Sinister Six tease in Sony's Spider-Man universe. Is anyone else sensing a superhero theme to this list? Alongside Sony's joint custody of Spider-Man with Marvel Studios, there is Sony's Spider-Man universe. Previously named the hilariously bad Sony Pictures universe of Marvel characters, this is the studio's way of building a Spider-Man franchise without a Spider-Man. As you may expect, things aren't going particularly well so far. Venom and its sequel were fine, though as a flagship franchise it leaves quite a bit to be desired, but the weak link so far has been Morbius. The trailers teased at the very least an interesting story, as well as the mystery and excitement of Michael Keaton's MCU-based Adrian Toomes turning up, but the movie was a letdown on both counts. The less said about the film itself the better, but at least there was Michael Keaton to look forward to, right? Well, aside from being little more than what was shown in the trailer, who shows a post-credit sting in the trailer? His scene was just the laziest tease for a Sinister Six team-up possible. Toomes' appearance in a different universe made no sense within the rules laid down by Spider-Man No Way Home, as he found Morbius to ask him to work together with absolutely no reasoning or context given at all. It was embarrassing. So much so that there are some that have already written off the upcoming Kraven the Hunter just for existing in the same universe. Number 5. The main character isn't actually the main character in Godzilla. Following on from the huge success of the MCU, shared universes became the done thing in Hollywood. Legendary Pictures got in on the action in 2014 with the beginning of the Monsterverse that would eventually pit King Kong against Godzilla in 2021. Whereas DC rushed to get their two heaviest hitters on the screen together for Dawn of Justice, Legendary did it right with a new reboot of Godzilla to kick things off. 16 years since the monster had last appeared on the mainstream big screen, there was arguably more buzz around seeing Bryan Cranston in the movie than the titular creature itself. In 2014, Cranston was still white hot coming off the back of Breaking Bad's conclusion, and his face in the Godzilla trailers almost sold tickets on its own. However, those who were excited to see the actor face off against Godzilla were disappointed when his character was killed off before the first act was over. Spoiler alert. The death of Cranston's Joe Brody instead acted as a motivation for his son throughout the rest of the movie, but Warner Brothers surely knew exactly what they were doing here. There was no reason to feature Cranston in the trailer so heavily unless to manipulate audiences before the film even began. Number 4. From the best to the worst of the MCU, Thor. Following up on Phase 3 and Avengers Endgame was always going to be a big ask for Marvel Studios, and unfortunately it has not gone too well over the last few years. Phases 4 and 5 have largely so far been letdowns in multiple different respects, but arguably no more so than Thor: Love and Thunder. Taika Waititi's Thor: Ragnarok, in no uncertain terms, saved both the franchise and the character, and so there was almost an automatic expectation for something similar from the follow-up 5 years later. In the middle of the MCU franchise's biggest ever rough patch, it needed another Ragnarok, and a Jason Aaron-inspired space adventure with Jane Foster as the mighty Thor, helmed by Waititi, should have done the job. There was no reason to expect anything else. What was delivered, however, was one of the worst of the 30-plus movies under the MCU banner. Love and Thunder took everything that was charming about its predecessor and exaggerated it far beyond what was enjoyable. Not only was this a huge letdown for Thor fans and Marvel fans, it was the final nail in the MCU coffin for some. Even Chris Hemsworth has admitted Love and Thunder missed the mark, in what was one of the biggest downgrades and unwelcome shocks in recent movie history. Number 3, a 20-year wait for this? Star Wars. It's the ones you love that hurt you the most. The original Star Wars trilogy was such a significant pop culture phenomenon that even if someone hadn't seen the films, they know Darth Vader, they know Luke Skywalker, and they probably even know Empire's big twist. 16 years after the Battle of Endor in Return of the Jedi, the Star Wars franchise made its own return with Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. The movie was so hyped and anticipated that it hit the $1 billion mark way back in 1999, becoming just the third movie ever to do so. Everyone flocked to the cinemas to see how George Lucas would follow up Return of the Jedi. How could the rise of Darth Vader, a young Obi-Wan Kenobi, and literally limitless storytelling opportunities go wrong? Well, trade taxation, Senate meetings, and Jar Jar Binks unfortunately saw to that. Anyone expecting the prequel trilogy to be anything near the same wavelength as the original was greatly disappointed. The franchise arguably didn't recover from this hit until very recently. Number 2, dinosaurs take a back seat in favour of locusts in Jurassic World. Jurassic Park is one of the most popular movies of all time, but the same can't be said of any of its sequels. There was a steady decline through The Lost World and Jurassic Park 3, before a brief spike in Jurassic World was followed by yet another decline. This culminated in Jurassic World Dominion, arguably the worst of them all. This may have been expected, as it's not often the 6th movie in a franchise is anywhere near its best, but there was at least reason to believe it may have been a lot better than it ultimately was. The conclusion of Fallen Kingdom teased dinosaurs roaming freely in the real world. This was a tantalizing prospect, only heightened by the release of Battle at Big Rock on YouTube, a genuinely good short set between Fallen Kingdom and Dominion. When Dominion actually released, however, in spite of all the marketing pointing towards it, the story wasn't about dinosaurs in the wild at all. They were just kind of there in the background, something truly criminal for a Jurassic Park movie. Instead, the film brought back Sam Neill, Jeff Goldblum, and Laura Dern to save the world from killer locusts. Name a bigger downgrade than being promised dinosaurs only to be presented instead with big insects. Number 1, LGBTQ+ representation in the MCU. As was expected after the events of Avengers Infinity War, the biggest talking points going into Endgame revolved around the characters that fell victim to Thanos' snap. How would they return? What role would they have to play in the movie, etc.? However, in the run-up to its release, there was something else that stole headlines. The Russo brothers confirmed that the 4th Avengers movie would feature the MCU's first ever openly gay character. In a franchise that had historically fallen short when it came to diversity and representation, this was huge, and was rightly talked about a lot in the days and weeks building up to the film itself. The reality, however, was incredibly disappointing. The character in question was Joe Russo's unnamed cameo, who spoke to Steve Rogers about his recent date with a man. A blink and you'll miss it moment from a never before or since seen character was not exactly the expectation that had been set. Most people thought this was going to be something far more substantial and real, but were left disappointed and in some instances insulted. And that concludes our list. Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below, and while you're there, don't forget to like and subscribe and tap that notification bell. Also head over to Twitter and follow us there, and I can be found across various social medias just by searching Ellie Littlechild. I've been Ellie with What Culture. I hope you have a magical day, and I'll see you real soon.